Assassin's Creed Odyssey is probably the least Assassin's Creed-like game in the Assassin's Creed franchise, and that isn't really up for debate. The game went all out on Origin's new mechanics, and it shows. When Origins was released, it was in a weird state, not quite AC, but not quite RPG. It was quite obvious that Odyssey was where Ubisoft was planning to go all along, with Origins becoming a way to slide players into the new formula. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was the game that was going to revive the AC franchise. Now, you may notice that I already actually made this video, or at least I made a short version, and it's kind of like the way Origins is to Odyssey, where that was what was sliding into this newer, larger, and hopefully better video. But now I want to truly expand on everything I wanted to do in my old video. And also, you probably noticed my voice sounds a bit different, and that's because I'm testing out a new mic. Tell me how you guys like it, because I can always switch back to the old one. But anyway, let's get into my in-depth critique of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Odyssey was, and still is, a highly controversial game amongst the AC fanbase, and for good reason. It was the least AC-like game in the AC franchise after all. Some people were saying AC lost its identity while others defended it as a natural progression after Origins. But I don't think it's either. I think at its core, it still is an AC game, whether you like to admit it or not. It still has the same values that the older games had: order versus chaos, power and corruption. The story elements are still the same. While Cassandra isn't an assassin, her story is still very akin to one. It also builds on the more mysterious aspects of the series, the Isu, or the First Civilization. While the game does not advance the assassin plot, it does expand and enhance the lore. Throughout all of the RPG elements and Greek mystiosing, the Assassin's Creed identity is still there, albeit a bit buried and brushed to the side. And a quick disclaimer, the footage that you see in the background is not indicative of most people's experience. I play the game on Nightmare, and that is not expected of you. So if enemies seem to deal way too much damage and have way too much health, that is not necessarily a fault of the game, just the way that I play it. But anyway, you guys have waited long enough. Let's get into the review. So as I mentioned earlier, Odyssey expands on a lot of things that Origins lays down. Ubisoft's plan has been perfectly executed. One of my last criticisms for Origins was that it never commits enough to one side, and I'm honestly glad to say that Odyssey does fix this problem. Odyssey is a great RPG, but not an AC game. Now, that may seem a bit contradictory to the thing that I said like 1 minute ago, but I promise you, it is not. I think I can still say that Odyssey is an AC game, but it's just not a great one. The game goes extremely far into the RPG's mechanics. While I do enjoy the RPG Assassin's Creeds more than the originals, I can still point out that isn't my idea of a really good AC game, mostly because it doesn't have assassins or Templars in it. But with that being said, I do still think it deserves its place among the franchise. But back to my original topic. The game goes much further into the RPG mechanics side of things, adding abilities, class builds, and dialogue options. I will dissect each one of these on their own and individually. So first, I will start with abilities. Upon leveling up the Spear of Leonidas, which is pretty much your hidden blade, you will gain access to increasingly more powerful abilities. Some allow you to assassinate multiple people in a single move, or to activate an overpower attack that deals massive damage. As I said in my previous video, these abilities are magical. Not just that they look cool, but they are literally magical. They seem out of range of normal possibility for a human, and that's because Cassandra is not a normal human. I won't go into spoiler territory, but there is a narrative reason why Cassandra can turn invisible, so it's not like it's totally just goes balls to the walls. There is a reason. If you want to know more about this, I suggest watching my narrative recap of the game. Yes, I know this is a shameless plug. I don't feel bad about it. Each ability has 3 levels that you can access via skill points. When leveling up, it will grant you a single ability point to use wherever you want. Unlike its successor, Odyssey's ability points have a tangible difference. You feel the extra armor and you feel the increased impact of a hit. You have an actual reason to get all of these skills, because they actually matter in the gameplay, not just in a number. The game has a massive improvement from Origins regarding its abilities, and one of my other gripes with it was that the most basic of skills is not available to you when you start the game. Now, this problem is still a thing in Odyssey, but not to such an extreme extent. The healing problem is still there, but thankfully you can still use parry and most of the necessary abilities on boot up. Unlike in Origins, you probably could go through the entire game using only the heal ability, and that's actually a good thing for me. While I would never subject myself to playing something harder than Nightmare, it can be a good challenge for those who want to rage quit. Like, a lot. But now for my favorite addition, from Origins to Odyssey. Class builds. In Origins, you always had a little bit of choice on how you wanted to go about things, but in Odyssey, you have all the freedom you can ever need. You can have a set that makes you unstoppable when stealthing, or a tank in combat. You can optimize a build to any of the three categories that are given to you. Hunter, which specializes in ranged combat, Warrior, which improves melee, and Assassin, which you guessed it, is stealth. Every single piece of gear you find in the world or loot off an enemy is unique in its ability. No two pieces, at least to my knowledge, are the same. This allows you to specialize in a category of your choice, but also produces a huge problem that is impossible to overlook. Since almost every enemy you kill has a piece of gear on them, it's just so hard to choose what you want when you aren't in the endgame. You get one really good armor piece, you upgrade it, you kill an enemy, and then find an even better piece of gear. This forces you to spend way too much time on the menu, and when in an open world game, you want to be looking at the menu for the least amount of time possible. But the best thing about the gear is how different it is from one another. Each one feels unique and special in its own way. For example, the build that I used to assassinate caps my hat constantly at 25%, but gives me 2.5 times damage. There's a certain risk and reward factor that has to be taken in when making a loadout, and it really asks you to think and not mindlessly equip gear. Other than the gear overflow, I think the equipment managing in this game is fairly decent overall. I do really like it. And this is probably the best version out of the AC RPGs that we've gotten. Origins didn't have enough customization and player choice, and neither does Valhalla, despite it taking after Odyssey in many ways. Finally, dialogue choices. I brought this up in both my old Odyssey review and my Origins review. I said that I don't really like the dialogue choices, but my opinion has changed slightly since then. I've heard a lot of people say that Cassandra doesn't have a predetermined character and acts like she has mood swings all the time. And yeah, I do agree slightly, but this hasn't been a problem for me. When I play, I try to do things the way that I, myself, would do them. The best way to play Odyssey is to go in with a predetermined character in your mind. Do you want to be yourself, a kind-hearted mercenary, or a drachma-loving serial killer? When looking back at some of her quote-unquote forced dialogue, Cassandra does actually have a personality, and it's quite funny. There is one side quest where you try and deny the fact that you're the eagle bearer and deny having an eagle, and then Icaros sits on her head and you can tell she just died inside. Another side quest that is attached to a main quest has you finding a little boy's caretaker. You can arrive and there are a couple options. You can try to convince who you are, or you can flat out say that you are the little boy, which I can imagine would be funny enough as Alexios, but it was absolutely hysterical playing as Cassandra. A grown woman trying to convince someone's babysitter that she's actually the little boy makes me laugh every time. I know, I have a low bar for humor, but this is the kind of stuff that I enjoy. Branching off from this is the side quests, and you know, they ain't bad. At least most of them aren't. Some of these are really memorable, such as the ones I mentioned earlier. Most of these I truly enjoyed, and it seems like quite a lot of work was put into these. And some of these are so goddamn funny, I can't handle them. One notable quest is when you need to find the imposter eagle bearer who has disgraced your name. You have to find info on him and where he is. You find out he's been lying to the citizens he was supposed to help, and it has some of the best consequences ever. Just take a look. You gotta see it to believe it.
Fly, Pegasus, fly!
I just love these strings of side quests. They're just so good. But what makes these quests really great is that the world actually impacts the quests around you. Once I killed a Spartan commander and went on with my day. I actually started another side quest where I was told to kill a Spartan commander. Can you guess what happened? Yeah, I killed him earlier, so I just had to inform the lady of what I did, and we went on with our day. Stuff like this, where your decisions and actions play into the world, is really great. I live for this level of detail. Another place where this comes in is in the main story. Depending on your actions, when you assassinate a cult member, which is basically a proto-Templar organization, it can change some of the side quests. I had the hint to start a quest to find a cultist in a certain area. I did that, and the woman who I was talking to actually started crying when she realized I was the one who murdered her husband in front of 100 people. It's really cool to see how your decisions impact those around you. And yes, the guy who I killed was a horrible human being, so you shouldn't feel bad. I proceeded to fail the quest, and then my hint was changed to something else, because getting help from that woman was no longer an option. A side quest that makes the shine is from one of the post-launch content packs. You try to help your ship's captain, Barnabas, I have no idea how to say that, find his long-lost wife. After you do some digging, you find out that she is dead, but he actually has a daughter. She takes care of the farm that her mother had made, and she says that she wants to stay on the farm and honor her mother, to Barnabas' disappointment. She says, and I quote,
Demeter herself burns these silos down. I know I'm acting in the will of the gods.
And, I got a bit curious, so I decided to do some tinkering. When the quest ended, I took a torch and lit the fire. I got a new quest to burn all of them down, so the daughter has to come back to the Andrestia. She eventually gives up and decides that she wants to live with us and she has nothing left, without her knowing that I was the one who did it. Stuff like this makes the game world shine and feel lived in, which is one of the biggest things that I critique a game on. For me to feel truly immersed, I have to feel that the NPCs aren't just NPCs, but people too. Speaking of the quests, I want to touch on a no-spoiler version of the main story. And first you notice that it's long. Pretty damn long. On New Game Plus, being always correctly leveled, it took 25 hours. And that's without the grinding for loot or XP. The game is hella long. But the story is actually pretty decent though. Like all AC games before it, it's a vengeance quest against the people who wronged you and your family. It has some pretty great story moments, but it also has some pacing issues that I brought up in my narrative recap. Like in my Origins video, I want to show one of my greatest moments in the story, and all the other parts should strive to be as memorable as this. Take this one scene from around the midpoint in the game. It nails the feeling of how memorable this game should be.
Come and get it.
So, what I'm going to be doing from now on is that any game that I review, I'm going to be adding in the parts that I feel are the most memorable to the game. Because, I mean, what's the point of really playing a game if it's just not memorable? So, from now on, in every review that I do, I'll be putting the most memorable and most fun parts of the game inside. Just because I feel like that's something that's really important that actually needs to be put into a review. Now, the game is divided into 3 different story arcs, or as the game likes to call them, Odysseys, hence the game's name. The cult story, the family, and Atlantis. All of these are individual from each other and can be done at your own pace. I really do like these arcs, except for the cultist one. It's really anticlimactic and makes you feel like you've wasted your time grinding for clues and cultist whereabouts. And that is not something you ever want to experience when finishing a game. I thought in my Origins videos that I waited along to get to the real meat of the video, and I proved that, I can make you guys wait a lot longer. But I mean, you guys have waited enough at this point. It's been like 15 minutes. So let's get into what you really came here for, the combat. So the combat has had a slight overhaul from Origins, expanding on it and fully completing the transformation from action-adventure to RPG. Now, I actually really do like the combat in this game. I think it's the most fun and engaging system we've had to date, and that's saying something considering the praise that I've given to Unity's combat in the past. The game relies heavily on melee combat as opposed to stealth. You can still take the stealth approach, as I tend to do, or you can go in guns blazing and embrace being a Greek demigod. The game really leaves the option to you, and I've seen a lot of complaints about the stealth in the game, and that's the lack of one-shot assassinations of high-level enemies or stronger enemies in general. And I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, but I actually like this. Like, a lot. It makes everything much more of a strategy, from the way you optimize a build to the order you take down the enemies. You have to be a lot smarter than just killing everyone that you see. And when you play, you have to use your skills correctly, such as the advanced assassination. It times 4 times damage at the cost of an adrenaline bar, which I will get to later. You have to make sure that you are constantly conserving it, as it may be in short supply at some points. It works great when you need to make a player think on their heels. Now, I know me saying this may have gotten me plenty of dislikes, as it's an Assassin's Creed game. You should be able to one-shot assassinate. But the thing is, you still can. The stealth build that I'm using in the background, I optimized to be able to one-shot any enemy on Nightmare. It doesn't mean you can't assassinate enemies, you just have to be smart enough to know how to build your character. But now a criticism for this overall system. Because of the overflow of loot, you are always changing your gear that you have on and never truly settle until you get a legendary set. This makes a problem where early to mid-game builds are never truly optimized enough to be truly effective, and it makes enemies just health sponges. You see, I'm not only going to be defending Odyssey in this video, there are plenty of valid criticisms, but most of the stuff coming out of the AC fan base is just bullcrap being used to hate on a game that doesn't really have the chance to defend itself. But now the controversy of stealth is melee combat, and it's truly great. Just like in Origins, you focus on light and heavy attacks to deal the most damage the fastest. Now, there isn't much to talk about here, since most of it's the same as my Origins video, but a problem that I have is the removal of the shield. We already had a shield in Origins, and in Greece, practically everyone used shields, so why the hell is it gone? Well, the answer is, I don't know. I truly do not know why Ubisoft decided to remove shields. It just removes a layer of depth that was there in Origins. But, do not fret, dear viewers. The game makes more than enough layers added in. Now in combat, so you not only have to manage light and heavy attacks, you also have to manage your abilities. You have to use the best ability at the best time, accounting for timing, adrenaline cost, and positioning. I just realized I forgot to talk about adrenaline. Adrenaline is your lifeblood in this game. It is built from assassinations, parries, and kills. It can then be spent on abilities as well as healing. You always want to make sure you have enough no matter what. You always want to have an open adrenaline bar, because healing also requires you to use one. You have to decide if you want to have a safety net around your health, or if you want to go for an increased output in damage. I really do enjoy this about the game, as it's not just your health you have to watch out for, because what's the use of health if you can't heal? The combat is absolutely excellent in this game, and particularly stands out in conquest battles. Now, what are conquest battles, you ask? Well, they are large-scale battles that take place between Athens and Sparta, because it's the Peloponnesian War after all. You can help either attack a region or defend it. Attacking will throw higher-level enemies at you, as well as mini-bosses for you to conquer. You can single-handedly turn the tides of an entire region just by helping out, and you are rewarded handsomely with loot and XP. Still, in the combat session, there is a mercenary and bounty system. When you are caught committing illegal acts such as murder or thievery, a bounty can be set on your head. As you are caught committing more acts, the bounty will increase up to level 5. As your bounties go up, more bounty hunters and mercenaries are attracted to you, and they will attack on sight. These are challenging mini-bosses that you can find roaming around the world and provide a decent challenge on higher difficulties. When killing more of these, you will advance up in mercenary tiers. Because after all, you're not an assassin, you're a mercenary. These higher ranks provide even more rewards such as increased XP, money, and even a fire horse mount. These mercenaries offer a really good challenge as well as a reminder as to not go killing at your heart's content. But now for the world and the ways to travel. And the world is absolutely gorgeous. Ubisoft's recreation of ancient Greece leaves nothing to be desired. This is the best recreation of a world I have seen in any open world games. The way the sun shimmers down on your character and the bright and colorful trees that make up the world, it is truly astonishing and a feat of game design. But now for how you get around the world. You have three methods: parkour, a horse, and your boat, the Andrestia. Parkour I won't speak much about because I already covered it in my Origins review. I feel like I'd be doing a lot of deflections in this video. Long story short, it's bad. For your mount, there isn't much to do. It's literally just a horse which gets you from A to B. You can shoot and swing your weapons, but not much else. I mean, it's a horse, I wouldn't expect there to be much of anything. Now for the best way to travel, the Andrestia. You get it early on in the prologue, and it's going to be your main source of travel between the islands of Greece. With the travel aspect, there isn't much there. Just activate the sail and you're on your way. But the oceans aren't safe. The Peloponnesian War extends to the seas as well. You'll find warring vessels carrying out their duties to their own nation states. You can choose to fight them or flee, but fighting is just so much more entertaining. You can alternate between the faster and weaker arrow volley or the slow but strong javelin throw. You'll be forced to decide which attack will be best for the current situation. And adding to the depth of this, there are even adrenaline slots. Landing successive hits will grant firepower. This works exactly like adrenaline, where you light the weapons on fire for the cost of a bar. Surprisingly, there are also different types of ships: biremes, triremes, and I'm assuming octaremes, and also elite ships. Biremes are smaller and faster versions of triremes that can dish out loads of damage in a short time. Triremes are larger and tankier but don't deal as much damage. Octaremes work the same as triremes but with increased firepower and damage. Once you destroy a ship, you have three options: let it sink, board it, or cleave it in half. Letting it sink will not only allow you to get any of the loot on board, but makes it that you can focus your attention on the other ships. You can also board the ship and take out its crew with yours. These are pretty similar to conquest battles that just require you to kill everyone in sight. You take the loot, and upon returning to the Andrestia, you'll find that it's been healed to take on more. Finally, you can cleave ships in half. There isn't much to this beside getting some distance and charging headfirst into the bow. The game always gives you options for how to do things. Well, anyway, that was it for this video. This is probably the longest video that I've done at all. So much work went into this, so if you enjoyed, please leave a like. Most of my reviews will be this length from now on, but since it takes so much time, expect videos every 2 weeks instead of weekly like normal. I'm sorry for that, but I need time to do this stuff. And Odyssey is just such a big game, I don't know how to make this any smaller than it already is. I feel like I suffer Luke Stevens syndrome to a smaller degree. But to everyone who made it this far, have a nice day.